Hello, everyone. I'll take my mask off. Thank you so much for joining us this evening to kick off Liminal Festival. The first thing we'd like to do today is invite Auntie Diane Kerr, Wurundjeri Elder, to come and kick off the festival formally and welcome us all into the space. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. It's been a while since I've been here and I'm getting older and greyer, look. But, it's a pleasure to be here. So I wanted to honour my ancestors and my elders and pay homage to the sacred grounds that we're on. I wish to acknowledge any elders of different nations, all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander persons, any First Nations peoples from across the waters. And I acknowledge you all and I pay my respects to your ancestors, elders and families. This area here is part of the traditional country of my grandmother and mother and ancestors, and I always feel very honoured to do welcomes on their behalf. I'm the eldest woman in my family line, so I take my role very seriously. And the thing was, I was just down at Melbourne City Council there, talking about racism and talking about making our streets safe. And then I come here and you're going to do some stuff, like things happen in circles. We always continue and roll around, It's very important. And it is important for us to share who we are and where we come from. If we can understand each other's cultures, we can live in harmony. And when we live in harmony, we eradicate racism and stigma. And we pave the way for our younger ones. They can live in peace and walk our streets without fear of any harm. And all it takes is an open hand and an open heart. And I want to thank the ones that are going to do some readings. I think you're all brilliant that you can do that. My mind doesn't sometimes work that way. I think of things when I'm in bed or I wake up and I should write it down, but I never do. And by the time I get up in the morning, my dementia kicks in and I can't remember. But it is important we look after each other. It's important that we look after our youth because they're our future leaders. And as I said, all it takes is an open hand and an open heart. Because we live in a community that isn't right at the moment. And we should all feel safe. And at the moment, even though this is my country, I don't feel safe. So please, talk to someone that you don't know this evening. As I said, this is part of my traditional country. My family lived along the Birrarong, Yarra, behind Flinders Street Station, before they were moved to a mission called Corrandirk Station in the Dandenongs, where my grandmother was born. MCG is our traditional ceremonial area, where Government House is a camping ground between Wurundjeri and the Boonwurrung. Trees between Richmond Football Club and the MCG are scarred trees, and one being a birthing tree. Further along at Dights Falls is our initiation grounds. Federation Square is a small meeting place. The grounds between the Children's Hospital and the Zoo is a larger meeting place for us and the Kulin Nations. So that's a bit about my journey and my story, and I love to share with people, and I love to have a yarn and get to know people, and it brings that friendship around. So I want to offer you all my hand in friendship so that we can journey together. May Bunjil, my creator, surround you all and give you strength and resilience. Womanjika, Wurundjeri Balak Yemen Gundibik, that means welcome to Wurundjeri country. I wish to welcome you from the tops of the trees to the roots in the ground. So when we look after country and we look after each other, country truly looks after us. And I say Nungodjin, that means thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey this evening and have a wonderful time. Nungodjin.
Thank you so much, Auntie Di, for your welcome to this country. As minority settlers on stolen land, we cannot call the work we do anti-racist without first acknowledging our own complicity and the responsibility we bear in terms of dismantling colonial structures. So I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and to note that this land was never ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Hi, I'm Leah Jing McIntosh, and welcome to the first Liminal Festival. That's too much. Thank you. 8 years ago, Liminal began as a collection of conversations, a project built on shared dialogue around work, art, and race. Over the years, we've grown beyond this initial interview series. We've published art and writing, criticism. We've run mentorships, residencies, and literary prizes, among other things. Each project, in its own way, is a kind of intervention into the historical racism endemic to the arts in this country. To me, criticism without action has always felt hollow. In order to expose racist structures and conceptions of excellence, we've spent the last 8 years creating work to make ourselves undeniable in a country which consistently attempts to deny our talent and our humanity. And in doing this, we've gathered community. The very best part of these projects has been meeting and working with talented artists across the continent. So it felt like it was time to loop back to our beginnings and to bring these writers into dialogue with one another. So much of Liminal is found online, and we wanted to create a physical space for these conversations, even just for a few days, where we might embody the terms of solidarity. There is something so immensely special about being in the same room, where moments and ideas and relations can ripple outwards and flow in ways no one can ever predict. This has happened to me many times over the years in this very room. I would like to thank the Wheeler Centre for partnering with us and for understanding our vision, and in particular I'd like to thank DM and Ronnie, and my thanks also to Lucy Hamilton, Writers Victoria, and the Creative Victoria's Creative Ventures program for supporting this project. Our MC tonight is the festival's brilliant creative producer, Hissy Pirani, without whom this festival definitely would not have come together. Over the past 6 months, we shaped this festival around sticky ideas of the nation, of borders, of violence, of fragmented and fraying histories, of languages we inherited against our will and which we now carry. We wanted to reflect our shared desires and concerns about writing and about living. And most importantly, we wanted to do it with our community. There's something quite unique to this festival in that every programmed artist and writer has worked with us in some capacity before, whether it's the novelist Brian Castro, who's judged both of our literary prizes, or comic artist Lee Lai, who was our first ever interview subject back in 2017, or Mykaela Saunders, who guest edited our most recent collection of poetry. Even our photographer, Hashem, and our graphic recorders, V and Kim, have been working with us for many years. So when I say community, this is what I mean. It's not programming a writer of colour for the sake of it, to avoid criticism or, God forbid, being cancelled. It's not networking, nor is it a transaction. Community should not be an empty invocation. To me, community is being in conversation over the years, whether in person or just through reading and rereading your favourite writers. It's writing alongside this work, carrying these ideas as you move through life, in the hopes of carrying out theory into the wider world through your actions, to create meaning with language that might enact change beyond the page. Community is found in holding one another accountable, in learning from one another and in teaching too. It's seeing criticism as a kind of love, a way to build together. Community is formed in conversation, whether it's difficult, gentle, joyous or rigorous. I've been thinking lately that we cannot forget that 10 or 20 or definitely 50 years ago, we would not have had the privilege to meet like this. But this does not mean that there was nothing before. In fact, it signals quite the opposite. We're here due to the intergenerational efforts of our elders, and by this I mean the ever underfunded, underacknowledged, undervalued projects that have been made with love and sweat throughout the years. I'm thinking of Peril Magazine, or 4A Gallery, or the Asian Australian Research Studies Network. I'm thinking of books like Alice's Growing Up Asian Australia, where her initial introduction, which outlined the colony's bloody history, was edited out before publication. Excuse me. And then there are the countless small and not so small resistances committed towards our shared future that we will just never know about. So much has been done for us with our present as someone else's future in mind. And so in our present, we work towards another future too. A future where projects like Liminal are completely unnecessary. So we brought this festival together under the shadow of the ongoing settler colonial genocide committed by the Zionist entity in occupied Palestine. I won't lie, in the face of this unrelenting devastation, it is felt and still feels difficult to see the point in art and writing work. I was thinking about this last week while reading Hasib's forthcoming book, Rock Flight, it's amazing. It's a book-length allegory of Palestinian occupation, and Hasib writes, "The more time I spend with words, the more I realise they just won't do." And if the poem were to leave us there, I think I would be inclined to agree. But the poem continues, pulling us along amidst it all, because what else is there to do but continue? This gesture makes me think of one of my favourite passages in Andre Dow's novel Annam, where he considers complicity in the colony. He writes, "Forgetting is complicity, remembering is complicity, making art is complicity. Hope is complicity, but so is despair." So if capitalism and the empire have deemed us complicit, then let this engine our work. Let us choose hope over despair. Let us work to make the world over. Writing has its limits, and tonight's celebrations and tomorrow's conversations do not promise to solve anything. Instead, we come together so we might bring care and community towards an unknown future, one which has to be better. Andre ends his passage on complicity, not with an answer, but with a simple question posed by the protagonist's partner, who asks, "Then what are we doing here?" So, what are we doing here? I might not have the answer to this, but we have made a festival filled with people who do. We hope that these readings and conversations might shift you, that they might sharpen your thinking. We hope that they open up your world just a little more. Thank you.
Thanks, Leah. So as Leah mentioned, I had the huge privilege of being the creative producer for the festival. And we have had some hiccups with the lineup this evening because of sicknesses and interstate artists not quite being able to make it. But we will be hearing from Evelyn Araluen, Andrew Brooks, Shertan, Bella Lee, Manisha Anjali, Brian Castro, and hopefully Michael has just arrived. Hello. So I am going to be reading some of Jen Nguyen's poetry, who could not make it tonight due to being out with the flu. And I'll just start. So the first poem of hers that I'm going to be reading is titled "Sometimes Pain is Just Pain." You said so yourself, so forgive me, these smiling tears. One time I stapled my finger and didn't even notice. These days, I write in color because I can, and it makes me happy. The problem isn't that we don't have enough time. It's that we thought, at the very least, we'd have more than this. I had everything I needed as a child in order to become happy, a well-adjusted adult, so why am I this way? You read lines etched into myself and interpreted that despite it all, I wanted to live. I kept a garden of weeds because they were beautiful to me. I didn't want to spray pesticide because insects are alive and need to eat too. At the beach, I picked broken shells instead of pippies because other people were already picking enough, and if I said it hurt me to pick a living thing that we should leave now, go someplace else, do something else, I would have probably become a happy, well-adjusted adult, so why am I this way? Is it because my parents never once said, I love you? I asked and wasn't happy with, of course. You asked me if I loved you, I said always, but you still left anyway. All the places we used to go have gone out of business and become something else. You call me here and there, each time with nothing but news of the death of someone I once cared for and loved them too, even if they became my family last. Sometimes pain is just pain. One time I stapled my finger and didn't even notice. I did it a second time just to find out what happened exactly during the first. I know what you're thinking right now, what names and labels you have for me. Sometimes pain is just pain, but maybe with some time, it can become something else. If I plant 100 seeds, maybe a few will bloom. If I write these words down, maybe they'll become a version small enough to swallow. If I learn a language and stop partway, maybe at least I'd know how to say hi and bye and please and thank you and I love you and sorry, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. This next one is titled Quiet Love Scenario. The day I realized a person can leave behind their scent on a bed they slept in the night before, I went crazy with awe at the level of detail life had to offer. It was the same month I gave up on plants that gave up on me, and instead began baking bread and choosing ribbons matching the personalities of my friends and family. One time, in the middle of the night, I woke up with a leg cramp. You got up too, half asleep, massaged and stretched my leg out. The same hands that earlier had helped me knead dough when mine got tired. How much time passed, I'll never know. When I woke up, it was already day. You were asleep next to me, and my leg bore a dull ache. This poem is titled, My Room Smells Like Salt. Seashells, pink, purple, white, some smooth, some coarse, a small broken piece from a tea set. You and I, a rainy Sunday afternoon. There is no sun, the seconds run long, the cat is asleep, and so are we. And this is the final poem, titled Venus Bay Beach, number 5. Go slow, gravel path, petrol station where leaving means waiting your turn. Roundabout filled with white cloud wildflowers arrived in time for low tide. A dirt road winding down a sand path. Water opened, a cat yawning, mist hanging, heavens relaxing. Throw my body out to sea, see how faithfully she returns it back to me. Thank you.
Nguyen, Narina Evelyn Araluen. I promised Leah I would not make the joke about being this evening's reconciliation action plan, but it's important that you all understand that I broke that promise. I couldn't do it. I'm so sorry. It was too good. It's too important for me. It's my praxis to torture Leah. I'm so honoured to be able to be a part of tonight, and also to, as always, to be a guest on Wurundjeri country in Kulin lands. I sit in great honour that sovereignty and that care for country and that custodianship as demonstrated and cared for by incredible elders such as Arnie Dye. And as always saying that, I don't think I'll ever again be able to acknowledge that we are on stolen land without also acknowledging the brutal violence of Australia's complicity and entanglement in the genocide in Gaza. And it's changed how I'll write poetry forever, and it's changed how I'll be a human forever. Yeah, I have two poems for you. 2 poems for you that are part of a book I'm writing. The book is called The Rot. The first poem is called On Not Writing Poetry. On reading Bonnie, on reading Saeed, on reading Fanon, on reading Mieville read Marx at my desk, listening to Fisher on Audible tell me those who can't remember the past are condemned to have it resold to them forever. Then rewatching again that scene where the dead friend says she will take the displaced surplus of love that grief leaves for us to swallow for herself. The room a tender glow from steampunk LEDs I bought at the reconstructed crude oil store. With money I was paid for poems howling to the dead. On spilling fake wine across every restless, urgent, vital document I'm yet to read. On the citational praxis of begging you to stay in this world forever. On and against the Commonwealth. In and against the violence of languages hidden in the books they never wanted the dirty, hoarding masses to read. On the power of states to misremember us, how we learnt the things that kill them. On the black cockatoos rising from the still swamped scrub. On the humming nostalgia of the screen as my lo-fi beats to study to wife turns her gaze to the moon. On her place too against the wall as we condemn those who attempt to resell us peace forever. On the things we gave to the fire, on what was owed to the flood. On the earned necessity of revolution as the only way we have to forgive ourselves. On the ghosts we disappointed, and now the haunting that is the only thing left to do, burning like evening light through branches of trees that don't belong in this land. On the arrangement of electricity required to memorialise you, against the dead centre of this poem, on the names I swore to take with me. This poem is called Losing Dogs, and it is a part of an embarrassingly long series of poems by, for, to, about Mitski, set in my bath. My baby, you're my baby. That's the poem. Oh, there's a lot of depressed girls out here tonight. I hope you're doing well. You're not, but I hope you are. My baby, you're my baby. Say it to me, I say, to the humid bath air, to the dog asleep under the moon. Seaweed, rose jam, white claws, and you, Mitski. In your amber halo of misery, the prophet of rotting girls. Last night I promised I would not drink tonight. Weep in the bath, eat dinner, or scroll the abyss. I want to feel it, I tell the tiles and the mould, as if there's a choice but to keep bracing against the world, the algorithm we taught what we could bear. I bet on losing dogs, you croon slow and sad. Let's raise a glass to that, to the cracked light collecting at our feet, to these, the oldest themes and the worst. But for the light, the moon, the dogs, the group chat where we recount our days, a snake stretching the fire trail, my nephew kicking his first ball. In another screen, a boy the same age, his body, his land, his history torn apart on live stream. Mitski, this was always unlivable. This could never hold our gaze back. My baby, it is hard to bathe with a body full of body horror. But maybe somewhere there is a room unclouded by grief and girls disintegrating into banality. Mitski, how much of this world was meant to be endured at all? On the way back from the rally, I am told your father was in the CIA. I want this to be apocryphal, but today I marched for Gaza while mourning a vote I didn't want, a history I will never accept. And you are so far away in America, the imperial killing machine. It is unforgivable to be bodies, floating bodies in grief for our living, loving mothers, sinking our comfort agonies while you echo across cracked tiles, while I am thinking of rivers, thinking of kissing your tears forever, thinking if we can survive our minds, then let us drown together. So clean at last, so fresh. My baby, my baby, my baby. The buoyancy of rage, the blunt witnessing of history. Mitski, give me the power to avenge the things I cannot live with. If you gave me back those howling hours, I would howl again. Thank you.
Hi. Thanks so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and to step in tonight. Sorry for those of you who were expecting someone else. I also want to acknowledge and to say that I'm very grateful to be on Wurundjeri land. I want to take a moment to thank the Liminal crew. It's such a pleasure to be here and to acknowledge that this always was and this always will be Aboriginal land, and that anti-colonial struggles are shared from here and to there, from the river to the sea. I'm going to read a couple of sections from a new project that actually has its origins in a liminal project, an invitation to write something for a liminal thing that dear pal John Cheer put together called Mirror, and I wrote something for that called The Year of the Ox, and that has become, or is becoming, a new manuscript of the same name. I work to drink Kopio Kosong, which is Bahasa Melayu for black coffee with no sugar. The coffee is thick and rich and sludgy, and I like it best when it's brewed with chicory root, earthy and bitter and slightly sour. Or I work to a poem that whistles a promise, like all good poems do. Let him enter this small store when the moon shimmers in the blue window panes. Let him pinch before our eyes tins of chicory. But the magic ingredient in Kopio is not chicory, nor theft, but margarine. That glistening mound of electric yellow developed to keep the French working class alive, just long enough to die on the front lines and factory floors while the emperor's small son was photographed atop a horse and made into a bourgeoisie basketball card. In its original form, the lustre was beef tallow churned with milk to make a drab grey substance. The myth of haute cuisine is a tale of cultural imperialism. Palm oil came to replace beef tallow in the food of the working poor, just as the African palm, disciplined into neat little rows, came to replace rubber trees in the plantations of Southeast Asia. The organisation of nature returned to the descendants of indentured coolies in a cup of thick, black, caffeinated mud that promises to stave off fatigue but will only amplify it. An appetite that knows no nourishment, like an Ouroboros or a haze that never lifts. At some point, Big Butter would try to turn the emerging middle classes against the immiserated. Things have come to a strange pass when the steer competes with the cow as a butter maker, We ought not now to desert her or allow her to be displaced, her sweet and wholesome product supplanted by an artificial compound of grease that may be chemically pure but has never known the fragrance of clover. But some have known the fragrance of the oil palm, which in Tamil is known as Kapaha Tharu, celestial tree. And in its scent, we remember that our future is predicated on the abolition of town and country, north and south. Last night I dreamt I could remember my dreams. I was a poet by the name of Janet Jackson, who wore a long, skin-tight latex dress made from the milky white goo harvested from the Palaquium gutter tree, which once upon a time was extracted to insulate telegraphic cables that rest upon the ocean floor. Janet could recall all of her dreams, which she translated into a song. Gonna make your body wet. Gonna make your body scream out yes. Gonna make you think of naughty things, like me on you and you on me. What's it gonna be? In my dream, the reader of the poem tells me I should better myself, but Janet has no interest in self-improvement, can smell a cop even when dressed as a reader, and so sets fire to the page and sings, gonna make your body cream, make you have wet dreams. The flames echo and re-echo against each other and now crush forms. Deliciously sweaty bodies echo and re-echo against each other. The smell of salt and the taste of ash hangs in the air, and cups of wine are passed out among the crowd, who suddenly fall quiet, just as Janet clears her voice in order to ventriloquize these words. The masses are in reality their own leader, dialectically creating their own development procedure. Now the reader of the poem suggests I ought to get back to work, and I feel a dull ache in my jaw, the kind you have when you spend the whole night grinding your teeth about something you no longer recall, and so I sink into sleep again. I'm going to read one last little section. Raina Diana Hamilton says, a song should be useful for both dancing and crying. Never a truer word has been spoken. Watch closely and you'll see a body acquired as the first notes sound. Possession is magic, not misery. Gabe tells me, play Nina Simone singing Who Knows Where the Time Goes, live at the Philharmonic Hall in '69. You use up everything you've got, trying to give everybody what they want, she says with a voice weathered by a million storms to someone who's not even in the room and we're already fucked up. The beat falls heavy as feet fall in collective step. Procession as possession, but without monotony. Then the organ rushes in, and all that is left, dancing and crying at the same time, which is one way to take flight while looking at the rubble and the expanse. Listen, and you might hear, arise, wretched of the earth, in all of our songs. The body acquired won't kneel, nor lie splayed, prostrate on cold, damp earth. The refrain leads further and further forward, like a hand instinctively reaching for a match or a body bent into a shape in excess of the word no. In time, strands of fibre, at once rough and soft, make a thick weave where nothing turns to everything. Thanks so much.
Hey everyone. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin lands in which I live and work. I am very proud of my colleagues, peers, friends, Leah and Hasib, for putting this festival together. It is a festival that I am very excited by, and I don't normally say that about literary festivals. I do want to go to every single event, and that's not usually a case, so very proud of Leah and Hasib. I'm meant to be a ring-in today, so replacing Mykaela Saunders, whose flight was delayed quite badly, which I feel quite honoured by, because I think Mykaela and I write from a similar sensibility. And I think festivals like this, they're pretty important because, you know, we gather together, and also in these times of collapse, we begin to think about how we can build a new future together, a future we want to see instead of a future that the establishment or institutional actors would like to create for us. And I think in honour of this ring-in little job I have, I'm going to read from my new book called Peripathetic. It's an essay collection, and I'll read from this essay called Shit Jobs, which is basically a fragmented essay about, you know, the many, many jobs I've done since I came of age. Let's just begin. Clocking in. The Latin for labour is suffering. Since work was engineered to corral groups of people into some semblance of organisation, to ostensibly liberate the poor from the trappings of poverty, labour has continued to change its face. Blue collar, white collar, physical, emotional, sexual, intellectual, invisible, psychic. Regardless, we continue to labour, to be a part of the labour force, both in public and in private. The logic here was that if you worked hard enough, you could simply stop working, or at least be able to work less. You might be able to join the upper classes and begin to signal a disdain for work. The body that labours contains memories of the work. The work becomes inscribed on our bodies. I've witnessed this in myself and the many co-workers I've laboured alongside for the past 22 years, as we ground ourselves down along the wheel in the pursuit of something better, more leisure time, more material things, more possibility perhaps, for both ourselves and those around us. Work sucks, I know, but equally it is suicide to opt out. It is unfortunate that work is an inevitability just as precarity is an inevitability. Most don't get to choose. Hour upon hour, each minute with an eye cast askance on the clock while on the clock. It is having to make it work, for otherwise it would not work. David Graeber notes in his book, Bullshit Jobs, that work remains a type of spiritual violence directed at the essence of what it means to be a human being. I tend to find friendship at work, trawl, subreddit, anti-work on my days off, hoping to find some kind of solidarity, some kind of instruction. Should labour be a tool or an extension of our desires? A fierce desire to destroy the work model, or, if that was too naive, at least become an expert in knowing how to exploit bosses more than they were exploiting me. I remember reading crime thing books as I came of age, daydreaming about living lives like those anonymous train hoppers and dilettantes from Evasion. They always sound made up. I didn't know there was such a thing as a trust fund kid then, so I thought they must have worked hard or found a secret trick or something to be able to shirk work as they did. All that irresponsible idling, time and expense stretched out with abandon, but there was no need to do anything in a rush, and where there was always tomorrow. I suppose safety nets are there to catch you when one falls from grace. Otherwise, you might as well fling yourself headlong into a chasm. It was here when I also started to wonder how so many of us couldn't, as Graeber puts it, knit sweaters, play with your dogs, start a garage band, experiment new recipes, or sit in cafes arguing about politics and gossiping about their friends' complex polyamorous love affairs. I did approximations of those things, of course, but they always at the expense of something else. Sometimes those things would become monetized into a job because it was the only way to make it make sense, feel a little bit less ripped off. There were times as well, especially in the early days, where I didn't have the guts to resign from a job, so I simply never returned. They'll call me, and I'll ignore them while I search for another job. When I switched my phone back on again, they'd have already moved on, as would I, with a brand new job, ready to begin the cycle once again. In these settings, I was simply another worker, my name and face as quickly scrubbed from memory as my personal details in work databases, and as quickly inducted and hired through a similar process somewhere else. As Amber Hussein writes in Replace Me, for as long as we were replaceable, our condition of relative powerlessness could be upheld. It helps to have low expectations or reckless nonchalance that forgoes the dream of material success. Retail, just whip out a resume like you've been a shop girl your whole life. Figure the rest out later. I see myself shuffling in and out of workplaces, a litany of co-workers and colleagues lined up single file within a mental Rolodex, all of us knowingly walking towards an open grave, where labour's annihilation rests on our collectivisation. In A Mushroom at the End of the World, Anna Singh makes a lucid observation. Precarity means not being able to plan, but also stimulates noticing as one works with what is available. Within this life of labour, there's no recourse, only the stolen small joys. I am only another pair of legs on this hamster wheel. Thanks.
Oh my God. So there's just some unintended light comedy for everyone tonight. Why not continue the tradition? I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are so privileged to meet, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and thank you to Leah and Hasib for putting on this festival. This is from a larger new sequence titled The Crystal World, and this is part 1, Historia Naturalis. In the early 20th century, the source of peridot for the jewelled artefacts of antiquity was discovered to be the small island of St. John, 50 miles north of the Egyptian port of Berenice. A triangular and unremarkable mass of land emerging from the waters of the Red Sea. Grains of olivine, of which peridot, sometimes called evening emerald, is the gem variety, can be found enclosed in networks of metallic iron on pallasites, a subclass of meteorite. These remnants of luminary debris, partially eroded on entry into the Earth's atmosphere, show their distinctive olive hue when placed in the path of the sun. During the Greek domination of Egypt, there was on the island of St. John a commonly cited mirage, appearing to those afflicted by an excess of light, a sea of glass like unto crystal, a product of the fusion of 3 simple substances, sand, soda, and lime. One commonly cited example is as follows: 2 enormous blanks weighing 20 tons each, cast and used as lenses in a telescope. Or, found in a cave at Beth Shearim, a raspberry-coloured slab, opaque and nearly 9 tons, the purpose of which is unknown. The Red Sea, a tropical body of water notable for its abundant marine life and extensive coral reef, is part of a large rift valley between the peninsulas of Arabia and Africa. In this region in antiquity, there existed plentiful deposits of lapis, not a gem, but a rock composed of several minerals. When finely ground, lapis takes the name ultramarine, a costly pigment commonly used in the destruction of images. During the reign of Cleopatra, the emerald mines of Upper Egypt near Zabara produced stones of a particularly desirable shade, the result of impurities introduced via minute traces of chromium oxide. Emerald, the rarest of gems, is marred by internal fractures, more easily shattered on impact than other varieties of beryl. a flawless specimen is almost never seen. At a later date, the artist Tiepolo replicates Cleopatra's wager with Mark Antony, general of armies and traitor of empire. Dissolving a pearl in a cup of wine, the queen drinks it down as draught or proof. In the image, the pearl appears suspended between the thumb and forefinger of the most beautiful woman in the room, flawless object on which all eyes are fixed. Tiepolo's work in this period is characterized by an always mantled light, having the characteristic of excessive luminosity, his frescoes exposing, through the cunning duplicity of hand and eye, a kind of internal corrosion of the objects. Called topazos, though more correctly topazios, by Pliny the Elder, author of Historia Naturalis, the first encyclopedia of the natural world, held at the famed and later destroyed Great Library of Alexandria, and then in monastic libraries across medieval Europe. The island of St. John was believed erroneously to be the source of large quantities of yellow topaz. Also in abundance at the time, indigo, orpiment, folium, verdigris, gathered as loose rocks on the surface of the sands. When dissolved in water and mixed with a binding material, as in works of tempera, the dominant medium for fixing images to surfaces until the 16th century, their various colours are accounted for by an internal structure of minutely thin layers, bending light rays first in one direction, then the other. Thank you.
I pay my deepest respects to the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. The colony of Australia is not recognised under traditional law. Some of these poems that I'll be reading tonight were written when I was living up north, and so I'd also like to pay my respects to the Minjungbul and Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nation. And thank you, Leah and Hasib, for putting this all together. This first poem is called Carrying Water in an Earthen Vessel. I carry water in an earthen vessel. The jug is made from earth beneath the palash. I follow the birth of fire through the wilds. The lacuna is lined with fable and milk. Bone marrow flowers in the howls. There is a white swan by the lacuna. I will barter with the swan. Paramahamsa, the supreme swan. In my vessel is volcanic ash, lizard skin, burning clove. It rains for the first time in this green village. I carry rainwater in an earthen vessel. The painter lines the lacuna with copper and wine. He's doubled over like an Agnes Varda gleaner. He renders an image of the dictator with the thread from his mouth. The dictator stands under a fig tree. Camel cigarettes in his pocket and crow tattoo on his throat. The dictator weeps into the earthen vessel. The painter changes into a swan to flee the cost of living. I carry the weeping dictator, the swan, the lacuna in the earthen vessel. The vessel returns to the earth as 1,000 centipedes. The centipedes change into seeds for the workers to plant. Anjir, plantain, baobab. And I'll just read a couple of short passages from my book, Nag Mountain, that came out a few months ago. To dissolve the distance between dream and propaganda, I drill a hole in my skull. The first truth is transcribed on the Australia-shaped birthmark on my waist. Birth was a performance of violence enacted on the body of the floral cotton mother. The second truth, composed of laughter, smoke, and rainwater, was smeared over the rearview mirror of our father's red 1982 Toyota Starlet, poured into the hungry throat of the earth, covered up with dalo leaves. We wave goodbye to the Toyota Starlet as it drives off the port and into the bowels of the Pacific Ocean. Paper jackal fly out of my mouth and into the misty air and into the monsoon. Paper jackal fly into the warm ocean and into the realm of spirits. A message from our friends across the Tasman dreaming our dreams. When one thing is abolished, another will take its place. I hold a conch shell to my ear to experience the music of the sea. The shell was made by an animal spirit with a longing to live and a vision for love that spanned across generations. The seashell outlived the animal, but carried their spirit in sound waves. I hear the sounds of paradise from the future. I go to the end of paradise to live my destiny. We find a foamy part of the ocean and take off our bangles, our blouses, and our petticoats. We change into fish and read the water. We cut a circle in the watery mythology. This is how we cut time in half. The colonial sugar refining company planted our bloodlines in the great southern waters. This is how our tea and biscuits became sweet on red Australian afternoons. There is a name for us, coolie. A message from our friends across the Tasman dreaming our dreams. Dream a dream in your place of conception, Port Douglas, far north Queensland. Things we carried on the Leonidas 1879, our ganja, our nose rings, our holy water. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Leah and Hasif, for organising this wonderful festival that got me out of boring Adelaide. This is a short piece from my forthcoming novel, which will be published in October. As a non-citizen, I was not entitled to any scholarship. They made that very clear to me, that I had taken the word Commonwealth too literally. So in this new country, I began as a walking postman. You know the type, pushing a three-wheeled cart in front, loaded with parcels and letters, pushing along the sealed flat streets through the township in all weathers, pushing mail through slots in the doors of the shops, waving hello, good day, great weather, catching so-and-so at the back of the shop with his face between her moistened thighs. I carry the knowledge of a priest, pushing back to the post office and collecting the next bundle of gossip through a slot, rumour, all blur and deeply secretive, names well known and names withheld. It's idiocy, this social hypocrisy, replicated from town to town, suburb to suburb, where all is known. And I arrive punctually every morning, consoling as a doctor on his rounds to listen, to sound, but not to enter into cupid tremors, knee trembles, or requited sighs. And sometimes my delivery is deliberately detained by a cruel delay, willfully manufactured, for all of this bored me and brought me to what little mischief I could get up to. It was the walking that I liked, the thinking, my existence at the extremity of the epistolary ward, reaching its demented destination and extinction. I asked the post office for divine dispensation from daylight hours. No postman does night shift, they told me. But I managed to get a medical certificate to say I was an albino. They reassigned me the kingdom of the post office. No reason was given, save the reward of a bicycle for use in a hillier region. It was a kind of punishment, though for me it meant less thinking and more exercise, which circumvented my thinking being and allowed my instinctive being to be astounded by the natural order of things. It was a kind of night music, the slithering of a snake, lovers at lookouts, suicides. I once found the body of a man who had shot himself inside his car, which was parked on a lonely cutting of a dirt track. What I was doing there was, of course, the first question the police asked me. I said that because I missed walking, being now a bicycle postman, I walked at night to retrieve the sensation of being astounded. And this wouldn't have sounded very convincing to them. But then if I had said more truthfully that I take refuge from sadness by walking at night, it would have augmented their suspicion to the point of an immediate arrest. They asked me if I knew the deceased. I said I did not, and did not look into the car because it was dark. The man may have been asleep. But you heard the gunshot. Did you touch the car door? No. Then you would need to provide fingerprints down at the station. I am the Chinese postman, out in all weathers. As you know, the Chinese postman problem was an algorithm proposed by mathematician Nguyen. In 1962, during the Great Leap Forward, when 30 million people in China had died of starvation, Nguyen used Eulerian graph theory to minimize the distance walked by a starving postman in delivering mail, preferably passing each street only once while returning to the origin. I kept returning to the origin like a dog, and that finally exhausted me. There is nothing much you can do to eliminate the origin of the word gunshot. You could do a lot with the word like shotgun, used figuratively in phrases like shotgun wedding, shotgun shack, he rode shotgun, etc. But gunshot only emits peril and portent. Back to front now, it wears a jacket of time, cloaked by the night, its crack no longer immediate in recall. And as I do not have a watch, I had no idea of what aspect of the night had ushered me into that menace of a gunshot, whether it was the freezing cold, the incipient flurry of light snow, the anticipation, or my own deliverance. Thank you.
Hello, I also want to pay my deepest respects to the Wurundjeri and Woiwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nations, and I also want to pay my respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the land on which I live and work, and also flew from today, although that almost didn't happen due to these god-awful, vaguely racist flight cancellations. I can't believe they tried to strike down both me and Mykaela Saunders. That's just evil if you think about it. I was thinking about Cher, what you were saying about, the ability of a festival like this to imagine a new world for ourselves. And I really agree, so thank you so much, Sib and Leah, for having us. It also kind of makes me very honoured to be part of a festival like this, which imagines what a writers' festival could look like without Julia Baird and Christos Tsiolkas. Not to be shady or anything. I'm going to read for you quite a short piece tonight. The piece was actually excised from a longer piece. When you're reading a review and then you're kind of why is the reviewer talking about their own lives for 700 words before they start talking about anything else, which is a predilection that I'm extremely guilty of because I'm a wanker. So I just want to say thank you, Cher, for excising this from the long review that I wrote for you. That was a very astute move, and I'm going to resurrect it here. The piece is called Julia Fox, and it's about being a bad person. The house had a fountain in the front yard and a marble fireplace in each room. It was a ludicrous house. Under a sunburst, the surfaces gleamed so brightly, it was like being in an infomercial. Everything felt fake, fake, fake. Everything began to blur into one blinding halo. In the house, it was easy to spend hours staring into the middle distance and calling it therapy. The mind atrophied. The body deleted the score. I was making very little money in a tedious job where I mostly entered data into a spreadsheet with over 3,000 rows. The rent cost almost my entire income. I had no savings, so I mostly spent time in bed or in the lounge room, which I had successfully annexed after a long crusade. Over the course of several months, I had incrementally moved my possessions into the lounge room until there was no space for any of my living companions. They were too polite to say anything, but sometimes we would frown at each other when we passed in the hallways. I didn't mind. I was a terrible housemate, it felt amazing. I had moved into the house after a period living in a ramshackle terrace in the inner city, where people were constantly coming and going. Sometimes there were children who roamed about. It wasn't clear who the children belonged to. The terrace was dark and smelt like a thrift store, but the parties were epochal. When there was a party, the whole terrace vibrated with an intensity that felt protozoic. The wood ruptured and the windows whistled. There were agonized pleas and furious paroxysms from both adjoining neighbors. One neighbor eventually found God and mellowed out. The other neighbor was the leader of a major arts institution who was forced to move after a high-profile cancellation where he got fired for bullying staff members. This is true, by the way, I'm being so vulnerable. In the new house, I missed the parties, the noise and the heat. When figures from my past asked how I was doing, I said I was having a suburban sabbatical. I said it was like living in Get Out. All the residents of the street sipped steaming mugs of coffee on their porches and walked their overly groomed dogs around the neighbourhood while beaming at each other. Their complexions matched their teeth. All the residents of the street stared when I walked past them. It was not the attention I craved, but it was attention nonetheless. Soon I grew restless. In bed or in the lounge room, I began to obsessively view the Instagram stories of socialites near and far, imagining myself in situations which entailed conversations beyond taciturn frowns in the hallway. I imagined myself saying wild and primitive things that would turn the mouths of anyone within earshot into taut little O's, signifying something between rapture and abhorrence. My text at this point was Julia Fox, whose stories I sent to others with religious reverence. There were images of her at various glamorous soirees, sandwiched between posts containing wordy filler pics against the media, against fellow New York Sybarites and provocateurs. "This is my favourite Julia Fox clip ever," I slurred over text message. People would respond, "Okay." That's if they responded at all. Around the same time, a pigeon became trapped in the skylight of the house. It mistook the glass for the firmament above. It spent days launching its entire weight into the solid surface. Thud, the pigeon went. Thud, thud. Attempts to return the bird to the world outside proved futile. After a few days, its carcass merely dropped from the ceiling. After a few weeks, I moved out. The sabbatical was over. Thank you.